Welcome, friends, to the fifth episode of Venture Forward Together, an interview series highlighting the work and stories of colleagues in the social impact and sustainability fields. We are Danielle Doza and Victoria Avi of Venture Forward Strategies, a consulting firm helping companies make a more positive impact in this world through better social and environmental practices. We're based here in Cleveland, Ohio. And Cleveland, like many cities around the country, had peaceful protests met by police violence. Venture Forward stands with protesters and Black Lives Matter. We hope to help push more equitable action for justice in our community, including environmental justice, which is what we'll be discussing today.
Thanks, Danielle. Let's get right into today's conversation. Our guest is Bianca Michelle. You can find her at Bianca Michelle 13 on Instagram. The Neighborhood Services Coordinator at Burtenville Carr Development, Community Development Corporation in Cleveland. Bianca is a seasoned advocate for community health and sustainability. She's a former student of mine at Cleveland State University back in 2016 or so, when she completed an independent study looking at community impact through the lens of sustainability in Cleveland neighborhoods. And she is also an entrepreneur and podcast host. We'll actually add those links in the show notes so you guys can link to them. She makes cold pressed juices at her business Ujima Refresh. Her podcast is Village Perspective, and you can find it on Spotify. Bianca, Michelle, we're so happy to have you here today. Welcome.
I'm really excited to be here. I love morning conversations, so this is awesome.
Would you like to share more about yourself? How are you feeling today? And anything you want to share?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind, I'm probably just going to do this naturally in the form of three moments of gratitude, because it'll just be easier for me to just stay on task and not ramble. But I'm Bianca Michelle. I'm a Cleveland native, born and raised in the Buckeye neighborhood, currently still living and working in the Buckeye, Larchmere, Shaker Square, Woodland Hills community, which a lot of us like to call Greater Buckeye. I love my neighborhood. I love my neighbors. I love my networks. I really just feel like I am a person who enjoys showing up in spaces and places that I occupy as my whole ass Black self. I love music. I love the environment. I love my mom. I love my dog. And I'm really just grateful for three things this morning that I'll just edify for the people in this community. First, I'm grateful for my breath. I love every inhale and every exhale that I'm able to take. So I'll invite you to take a deep breath with me now. I'm just really grateful for my inhale. So let's just inhale together. Inhale and exhale. I'm really, really grateful for my breath because it reminds me that I'm alive. Secondly, I'm grateful for technology. I'm grateful for technology for it creating pathways to still connect with people while being socially distant, but avoiding disconnection. Specific piece, I just got an Apple Watch like 2 days ago, first one. And I was grateful for the technology and how the watch allows me to be productive, because my cell phone is always dying because I use it for everything. So now still being able to get messages. But I was really grateful for the fact that in purchasing this Apple Watch, I wasn't sacrificing anything else. I still had food. I still had support from my mom. My bills were still paid. It was just a nice realization that, you've overcome some mountains and some molehills that you thought were going to deter you from staying connected to your purpose. But you stay steadfast in what you believe for yourself and how you created value, and those things have turned around. And so I'm in a different financial position than I was, 6 months ago. And so purchasing this Apple Watch and a few choice pair of sneakers made me feel affirmed in that place. And then thirdly, I'm grateful for, 65-degree mornings on Larchmere Avenue and sitting on my porch and watching the sun come up at 6:30 and hearing people start to begin to take care of their lawns and do Saturday morning stuff. Like, I find joy in the little things these days for many reasons that are probably obvious, but I just appreciate those small slices of joy. So grateful for my breath, grateful for my technology and repositioning and financial upgrades, and 65-degree Sunday morning in Larchmere. Saturday morning in March.
It all blends in these days.
Yeah, it all goes together. I don't know what day it is.
Do you want to talk more about the work and what kind of brought you to the work that you do today?
Yeah, I mean, a good place to start would probably be Victoria's classroom. Like she said, I'm a former student, and I was able to take a sustainable business practices class with Victoria, which I still have all the books that we read during that course, because they weren't just textbooks. They were pieces of information that are still relevant to the work that I do now. And it was there that I discovered this intersection of environment and community development. And then further, I explored that intersection via an independent study that was all around how does sustainability impact neighborhoods and community development. And it was there that I learned about Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and then pursued an environmental justice-oriented position with them that really focused on trying to engage residents in 4 neighborhoods around sustainable practices and climate resilience. It was there that I learned about the full network of CDCs in Cleveland and how some were effective and some were not. And then after almost 2 years there, I decided that I really wanted to articulate my voice in this space of environment and engagement and inequity. And so I started doing independent consulting under the moniker of NIA Solutions, and focusing again on environment, engagement, and equity. So clients that I had really focused on that type of work. Did a lot of work. One of my clients ended up being Neighborhood Connections, and I was contracted to do some engagement work in Buckeye, the neighborhood I live in and grew up in, around what do residents think about a new CDC, Burten Carr Development, coming into the Buckeye neighborhood as the CDC of record. Did that engagement process, reported out at a large community meeting in October of last year. And by December of last year, I was interviewing for the position of Neighborhood Services Coordinator at Burten Carr Development to lead the strategy development around offering services to the Larchmere, Ludlow, and Shaker Square community. And so that's what I do currently. I still do contracted work around engagement, equity, and the environment. I've worked with the Cleveland Water Alliance, the U.S. Water Alliance on a water equity task force. I'm still active in that initiative today. And a big partner in that work is the Sewer District and Drink Local, Drink Tap, and the Office of Sustainability and Emerald Cities, Black environmental leaders. There are so many people involved with that. Burten Carr is intersecting with that work. But now I am an employee at Burten Carr. I still do work with Neighborhood Connections. And a lot of that work currently is around supporting other organizations and taking a moment to think about how the work that they do is relevant to what's going on right now. Was privileged to help facilitate, and facilitation is one of the things I like to do the most. I enjoy that. I didn't know that. And I think the last 2 years has allowed me to illuminate that. I like ushering people into conversation, ensuring that we stay on target and extract some actionable items, and making other people feel like their voices and perspectives are valued in the room. So I was privileged to lead some conversations with the Cleveland Foundation and my partner in, I call her my partner in struggle and facilitation, Kayla Geske of Neighborhood Connections. We facilitated conversations on behalf of Cleveland Foundation around public space access and technology, or the digital divide. And that conversation was right after the passing of Ahmaud Arbery, who was assumed to be jogging in a neighborhood and was murdered. We have another conversation coming up around mobility in the city of Cleveland during coronavirus. So whether you walk, bike, ride, or stroll for our differently abled individuals, how has transportation or mobility been hindered or different for you while navigating coronavirus? And the most impactful lately, again, with the Cleveland Foundation, was being involved in a conversation with their staff around reflecting on what they need to do to reposition for the now. How has the work they've already done been taking into consideration equity and racial justice? But what more do they need to do to support efforts, energies, and individuals or institutions on the ground that are doing the work that needs to be done in Cleveland and needs to be recognized for combating racial injustice, systematic oppression, systematic racism, or work that supports individuals that are doing that. So that was nice because in navigating my own healing, anger, frustration, taking the space to navigate those things and heal myself. By the time I was invited to be in those spaces for that type of facilitation, I was able to do, like I said at the beginning of this call, show up as my whole as Black self and be transparent about some things. And I wasn't under the cloak of Black professionalism. I wasn't worried about PC answers. I didn't have space for that. I didn't have the capacity for that. The only thing I was able to do was to be honest and transparent. And the beauty was that it was heard, it was received, it was applauded, it was shown gratitude for being transparent enough that others may potentially learn from my honesty. And all I was doing was reflecting on what I felt.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And how I appreciated organizations like Neighborhood Connections and like Cleveland Foundation and like Burten Carr and like Black environmental leaders that are taking space to see how people are actually doing, and then trying to figure out how do we harness this energy, this frustration, this fed upness of what is happening into what we know how to do. So not trying to get out of our lane, not trying to do something, drastically different, but how can we make sure that what we do is impactful and matches the intention and the understanding that we're seeking to cultivate by taking a step back and saying, hey, we need to listen a little bit more, a lot of bit more, but we need to make sure we're listening to the right people. I appreciate that. So I feel like right now, I know I went a little roundabout, but my work in community development through Burten Carr and through my independent consulting and through just showing up as myself in spaces really is about people. Like, I love to engage people. I'm certainly intentional about what I want to engage around, but I think there needs to be some care and concern for how we do engage our communities, because as institutions or organizations, we're seeking community sometimes for our own gratification and information. We want to be informed. So engagement is not, it's supposed to be a their situation, but oftentimes institutions or organizations get what they need from community and move on. So we can't do that anymore. We can't knock on people's doors and ask them to invite us into their homes and their spaces and then take what we need and never come back. That's not engagement. That's, I don't know what the hell that is. That's door-to-door salesmanship. But that's not engagement. If we're going to engage, then we have to seek to build trust, establish rapport, build relationship that is mutually beneficial. So that doesn't mean I can knock on your door and ask you to fill out a survey. That means that survey is the beginning point of me getting data that I need to assess how I can use the information that you gave me to apply the value that I offer for your benefit. And if I'm truly doing it for your benefit, I don't want to just talk to you one time. I want to build rapport so that I can show you, hey, remember I did this because you told me this is what you needed. So now what else do we need to do? We need to start a conversation and a dialogue. Again, we need to build relationship. That's true community engagement. And that's the work that I value. And Burten Carr has given me an opportunity to do that in this neighborhood that I live in, a neighborhood that's adjacent to the community that I grew up in. But what I really value most is that the work that I'm charged to do in Larchmere, Ludlow, and Shaker Square is not intended or designed to be done in a silo. Though I'm dedicated to Larchmere, Ludlow, and Shaker Square, my work is certainly meant to connect what's happening over here to Buckeye, which is supremely important to the overall prosperity of this neighborhood, to Woodland Hills, and to Shaker Square. So I consider myself to be proud to be a bridge builder, proud to be an interpreter of sorts, because I do feel like one of my superpowers is being able to go and talk to the Cleveland Foundation board and being able to go talk to Jamal down the street on 93rd and Buckeye, and being able to talk to professors at CSU, and being able to present on a panel with the Office of Sustainability. The fact that I can occupy many spaces and take the same message and make sure that the audience that's intended to receive it hears it in language that is going to be digestible for them. I feel like that's a skill that I have, and I try to use it very well, and not take for granted the power that and responsibility that holds.
I was going to say a superpower.
Yeah. So that's kind of the culmination of where I feel like I am professionally. And I hope that's sprinkled in the answer around community development and such.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you have this, gratitude practice, and I followed you on IG for a while, and participated when I could.
Yes, yeah.
Which is, it's a very grounding, presencing practice. Do you have a practice for envisioning the future?
Yeah, so the last 2 years, it's been vision boarding. And I'm looking up because I used to have this whole wall right above my desk that was nothing but a collage of vision boards over like the last 3 years. I just took it down recently, and a friend of mine, Seven, recommended that I take those images of those vision boards and get them put into a book, because what I was looking for was just a way to refer back to them, but I needed something else in my space that I could see. So lately it's been, I don't know, maybe it's the quarantine, but I've been wanting to see pictures of nature. So I'm building a new collage on my desk that are pictures of nature. A good friend of mine, Mark Silverberg, is an amazing photographer, and he takes these images that are just like amazing, and I love them all very, very much. So this is my favorite. These types of images make me look beyond what's there. So when I saw this image and I told him I loved it, it was because I don't know if it's the angle or the black and white, but it made me feel, just looking at it, made me feel like I was laying in that field. And if I envision myself laying there, I'm probably just looking up at the clouds, envisioning something beyond what I can see. So now my process is a lot of meditation. That gratitude grounds me in the now. But my meditation and my walking and my thinking about things that I'm working on, not from the vantage point of what the impact is now, but what do I want the impact to be 3 to 5 years from now? So if I'm thinking about how I wanted to hit 3 to 5 years from now, I'm thinking about what are the things that I need to do right now to lead to that impact. I'm not just thinking about what do I need to address right now to be okay. I don't want to just meet survival standards anymore. A lot of us are looking to survive. I'm blessed and I have privilege that I'm surviving okay. So since I have that stance, since my posture is not just about basic survival, I feel like there's a duty and a responsibility for me to have foresight for those who don't have the ability to have that right now. And so that's really my process, is just thinking about, even if I just take the podcast, for example, the podcast was something that I wanted to do years ago, but I felt convicted to need to start it during COVID. Even before this resistance and uprising started, I felt convicted to start it during COVID, because I was like, man, 3 or 5 years from now, I need recorded, documented, factual information from my perspective and the perspective from people who look and live and have similar experiences as me. I need record of this shit. There was record of movements of the past. There's records of the Black Panther movement, of the MOVE movement, of the civil rights movement. There's records of previous genocides and massacres of people. And I know far too often from the educational system here in the US, a lot of history is suppressed. So I want to make sure that there is record of what is happening right now. So that's why I do the podcast. It's foresight. I'm not thinking about the podcast just to pontificate for no reason. I'm thinking about it because I want a record 5 years from now what's happening right now. So a lot of it is just, I think, is a learned perspective. It's maturation. It's deeper entrenchment in the things that I feel purposed and called to do around community development, around equity, which to me encompasses environmental and racial justice, and engagement. So it's not only doing the things that need to be addressed right now, but from those lenses, really thinking about, what do I want for my city, for my neighborhood 5 years from now? And what do I need to do now to position myself on the chessboard to make those things happen? Mm-hmm. So no more just vision boarding anymore. I'm past just vision boarding. I still think it's a valuable tool and I love it because it's just a collage of it all. It's fun to do with people. It's a good activity.
Well, it's sort of purpose, right? you're beyond it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in thinking about environmental health specifically, how do you see that playing a role in creating more equitable communities? And what are some of the biggest challenges in advancing environmental health and justice?
Oh man, this is an awesome question. So the way I see it playing a role is if we change the physical environments of some of the communities that have been traditionally redlined and ravaged, we can begin to provide at least some physical aesthetic healing to some communities and improve health conditions, because communities that have been traditionally redlined have been also spaces where manufacturing shows up, and air quality conditions are not inhabitable, and people have respiratory conditions beyond, disproportionately to other communities that don't have similar circumstances and systematic oppressive things built into them. So I feel like, if I take my community, Buckeye, there is there's a network of parks that exist and green spaces that exist in this neighborhood. They're already here, that could provide Wi-Fi access if there was a network built between public spaces that were also revitalized as green spaces and safe to inhabit, with right now features of, accessible water fountains, maybe some sanitation stations, functioning basketball hoops, park signage and lighting to promote safety. But if a network of those parks, if there's 5 parks in this neighborhood, if those public spaces were upgraded to proper standards, green space and green infrastructure standards to support, water, extra water absorption, and all those environmental factors, that GI addresses, and then also layered in technology and public Wi-Fi access. If you built that public network, what would that do to change your access to educational resources and needs for community? At least if we build the network, then we can maybe address the tools that people need to access those networks. But even right now in this COVID, this managing of this pandemic, the digital divide was already a conversation, but it is exacerbated when you now tell people to have school from home, and I can't have school from home. I don't have internet access and I don't have a laptop. So you want me to do all of this from my auntie's cell phone in her car? Because that's the only place I can do my homework. Mm-hmm. And that is not even a worry for students in Beechwood, because each student gets a laptop upon entering the school.
Right.
It's a different baseline, but you're expecting the same outcomes from people, and it's not realistic. And again, that's a small example, but that speaks to how our systems are riddled with inequities. So I feel like, even just, again, focusing in, if we start with public spaces or environmental spaces, we're addressing a portion of systematic oppression that has been projected onto these neighborhoods because they are environmentally redlined. There's real estate impacts to the things that redlining, which was about properties and zoning, didn't only impact brick and mortar. It impacted the soil and the livelihood and the foundations that other people had no choice but to build their families upon. Mm-hmm. And so changing that soil means that you're preparing space for something fertile to manifest from that. And to me, the analogy of preparing the soil is revitalizing the earth on which these communities are built.
What kind of resources do you think are needed? What needs to change in order to, enact better environmental policies, at the neighborhood level, really achieve environmental justice? What's holding us back?
Well, if I speak frankly, and let's be clear, I worked in the environmental space for 2 years in neighborhood progress and then did independent consulting, but I was fortunate enough to be well connected to the philanthropic community and go to national conferences all over the world. So I've seen how other people in other places do environmental work, and Cleveland is definitely a space. And this is not just an environmental, I noticed this. So when this gets out, some of my Clevelanders are probably going to be pissed at me, but I feel like we're always a city that's waiting to see what somebody else does and afraid to innovate. So we're going to wait to see what Chicago does. We're going to wait to see what New York does, and then we're going to sprinkle Cleveland on that, as opposed to having a tremendous amount of environmental stuff happening in this state and in this city that's not connected. People aren't collaborating. I'd say if I started touching on this in 2016, in 2018 is when I saw people trying to collaborate, and it was really around the Cleveland Climate Action Plan. But the problem with that is once the Cleveland Climate Action Plan was done, there was no follow-up. And so you had all these organizations, healthcare organizations, universities, private foundations, private real estate companies, sewer districts, or public utilities, all at the table around this action plan. Residents at the table, ready to deploy information to communities. But then once the plan was done, nothing else came from that. Sustainable Cleveland 2020 is done. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
We finished all these different years of promotion. Now what? And that's not a knock on the Office of Sustainability at all. That's a knock on our ability to really operate in the true spirit of collaboration. And collaboration is not collaboration for the sake of promotion, to say that we're all at a table together. It's collaboration for the sake of we're all bringing our individual gifts and talents to the table to produce a greater collective impact. Mm-hmm. And I just hate to see that we don't leap out on our own innovation and not be afraid to be an early adopter and accept the benefits that come with being a first mover. Yes, I'm using MBA terminology, but first mover's advantage is real. And being an early adopter is real. But we don't always have to wait on somebody else to innovate. We can figure it out ourselves. We have the resources here. And if we don't tap into those resources we have here in the form of our human capital, that's why we lose people, specifically minorities and people of color who leave Cleveland to go to other places where their voices are actually heard and their intelligence is capitalized and their ideas are made into actionable items that lead to tangible impact. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see us lose the talented people that I know I intersect with because we're afraid to innovate. That's one thing. The second thing for the industry as a whole or the environmental space, to be so green, it is also white. Mm-hmm. It's just very white.
Oh yeah.
And that's just what it is. So in order to, I was happy when I met Jackie Gillen and Samia Bray, and they were in the early stages of starting Black environmental leaders. And that really is just a space where all of us people of color and grassroots engagements organizations that are looking to do or already operating in environmental spaces are making sure that we're sharing resources and becoming a space where others know that before you start talking to Black communities about environmental shit, do you really know what you're talking about? Do you know the proper way to approach preparing data and research from a perspective of Black environmental leaders is something that roundtable is doing. But I think it's really just trying to Captain Planet the situation. It's trying to combine all the powers of these and perspectives of these environmental leaders who are persons of color and women and men, of course. Everybody is all these persons of color environmental leaders, but they're trying to make sure that they're organized to be a more, again, effective and impactful resource for the broader environmental community and philanthropic community and community development community, because we know the value and importance of environment, and we know the value and importance of making sure that we are calling it an environmental justice thing when it really is environmental justice, and it's not just environmentalism, or it's not just greening, or what's it called when a company or a brand, greenwashing. It's not just greenwashing. It's truly, if we're trying to do something in a neighborhood, let's not just call it climate resilience. Let's call it, we're trying to redo systematic oppression that's happening in this Black neighborhood. Like let's call it a spade. And if we're going to do that, there's a way that you have to make sure that you're culturally competent in doing that work. Mm-hmm. Your environmental approach in Twinsburg is not going to be the same in Huff. It cannot be. So that's what I think. And the green industry is very white. There needs to be more voices. I thank Victoria for introducing me to Majora Carter and the sister out of Chicago, Naomi.
I forgot Naomi's last
name. You know what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
But those were voices that I got hip to that I didn't know anybody else who knew who they were. But they were like sheroes to me. Like Majora Carter is like everything to me. Like I would probably spaz out more if I met Majora Carter than I would if I met like some famous celebrity. Like real talk, I would love to meet Beyonce, but I would have a bigger freak out with Majora Carter. And I know a lot of people aren't going to relate to that, but I know what she means.
Yeah.
I know what she means to me from an environmental justice standpoint, from an organizing standpoint, from a social enterprise standpoint, the businesses she has in New York right now, like whole ass hero. Whole ass hero. So.
And she's friends with Kerry Washington.
Oh, come on. Doesn't get any better than that. Olivia Pope?
So, right, Majora Carter is like a perfect example. So is Jackie Gillian, right, of an individual who wanted to get involved in improving their own communities and improving the physical health of their communities. Yeah. So do you have ideas, suggestions about how individuals can get involved in their neighborhoods to advance environmental health and justice?
Yeah, so I would just edify two platforms. One is IOBI in our backyards, and the other is Neighborhood Connections. IOBI provides a platform for you to do crowdfunding to do small resident-led projects. And the reason why I'm bringing up IOBI and Neighborhood Connections is these are resources that are accessible to anybody. You don't have to have approval to do a project. So hypothetically, let's say you want to get some supplies to make raised garden beds for you and 5 of your neighbors on your street, because all 5 of you want to grow your own produce and share amongst other neighbors, because you have a high population of elders and seniors on your street, and you want to do something to provide groceries for them that are healthy, sustainable, and easily accessible. So all you need is the supplies. You know how to make the beds, you know how to do basic gardening, and you're willing to teach all your neighbors how to do the same and build the raised beds together as like a community project. You could go to IOBI and make a crowdfunding page describing that project that I just did. Ask people to support you. You can ask the people on your street who are going to be involved, and you can raise the $2,500 you need for all the supplies, seeds, soil, hoses, everything you need to make this project happen. Or you can apply for a grant from Neighborhood Connections around the same thing and get money that can help you do that for no other reason that they want to support resident-led initiatives. I feel like that's a way that we can change things, or that people can get involved at an individual level where you don't need the approval or somebody else to sign off or any of that stuff. You can do it. It's accessible to you. You have an idea. And a lot of times what I've learned is that folks have solutions to the problems or the issues or the complaints that they have. They have solutions. They don't feel like they are well-resourced enough to make it happen. And so they're waiting on somebody else to do it, as opposed to realizing that they can do it, or they can invite somebody else to help them do it and not have to pay for it themselves. Resources are available to support your solutions. You just got to have a little bit of energy to look for them, or to connect with somebody like me who knows them and is open and happy to tell you about them. I think that's one way. Another thing is capacity building. Organizations need support sometimes to learn the things that they don't know how to do. But the main thing that I feel like for our region and our city, specifically from an environmental standpoint, is they got to let other voices in the room. There's a, I don't know what to call it. Like there's a won't go sit down issue in this region. There are a lot of older leaders that are just in positions because they can still be in positions, but their impact and the value that they add has expired. And they honestly need to be in succession planning as of yesterday, but they're not succession planning, and they're not grooming the next generation of leaders to really take Cleveland to where it needs to go. And that's not just that's for a young generation that's not being groomed, or they are groomed and they are ready and they're knocking at the door like, hey, I have tangible insights and ideas that can really make an impact here, and you won't let me in. And then they leave, like I said earlier. So we need to get some people to sit down so some other people can stand up. And a big portion of the people that need to stand up and that I would like to see stand up are Black, brown, and women. They need to be in these different positions to make the impact and to be heard in the way that they need to be. Because I said this before on one of my social media platforms. It was after I watched the City Club with Mordecai Cargill and Danielle Sidnor of the NAACP. powerful dialogue. I would invite everybody to go listen to that. But after I listened to it, I shared it on my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I said, this was a powerful conversation, well facilitated by Dan, certainly insightful through the comments of Mordecai and Danielle. There are voices in Cleveland. Are we listening? That was my question. Mm-hmm. There are perspectives in Cleveland that are valid and could really lead to you appropriately allocating the value that you seek or intend to offer. Are we listening? There are people who have ideas and solutions that are telling you about them or attempting to tell you about them. Are we listening? So I feel like we got an issue of people not willing to sit down so other people can stand up. I feel like that's a big thing. Mm-hmm. And that would make some shifts in this space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But what you said about some of the leaders that we have in our city that are still around in their positions, and one of my biggest issues that I've had for a while is that they're also double dipping. Yeah, it's like
that's the culture, though.
Yeah,
it's the culture.
Let somebody else lead. Let somebody else learn.
We'll build up the community, right? That we want to talk about community building. You build up other leaders. Mm-hmm. And
real leaders don't have a problem doing that. They enjoy it. They want to see somebody carry on a legacy that's informed by their own experiences. But it's the people that are like white knuckling these positions that are just really doing a detriment to us all.
Yes. Couldn't agree more.
So I wonder if it's a good time to shift into the venture conversation or the venture part of it. So Bianca, when Danielle and I started the business, we were throwing a bunch of names around, and we wanted to have the venture be part of the name because we believe that that's an engine. We can create a lot of change and value through a venture lens. It doesn't have to be necessarily, for profit. It could be nonprofit. It could be hybrid. But there's a lot of energy around venturing. Yes. And also in venturing forward together, we wanted to incorporate that as well. I want to talk about the importance of developing small businesses. And you can talk about, from your perspective, developing your own small business and what value it brought to you and to the community, and how could we kind of keep doing that? How could we keep multiplying opportunities in all of our communities in Cleveland in regards to venture?
So for me, it goes back to that concept of village building, which I consider community development. And the core of why I started my business was to address a need in my neighborhood. So Juma Refresh is a cold pressed juice business. Well, I had just started grad school. I was living on 126 in Larchmere. I had a roommate who had just lost her brother to cancer. I was working full time while in grad school and going crazy, like super stressed out. And in my first semester of grad school, I lost a cousin and a really good creative friend of mine who was like a brother to me. We did poetry together, both to very violent crimes in the neighborhood. And they were both murdered. One was a case of mistaken identity, and the other one was definitely intentional. But during my first semester of grad school, so I was navigating a lot of grief and a lot of depression and anxiety. And my roommate was navigating grief, depression, and anxiety. And we were both like, I cannot afford to go see a therapist every week or every 2 weeks like I need. And I'm really not too keen on taking this medication that is being recommended to me. We need to find if there's anything that we can do before we go that route ourselves to manage what we're navigating. And so she got a Jack LaLanne juicer off the internet. I looked up some recipes and we started juicing together to like just try to do something else. I was zoned in on the juices and she zoned in on the yoga. So she would lead us in like morning yoga in the house, find YouTube videos. We would do it together. I would make juices. And we did that for like a year until she moved to Florida. Well, I got really into the juices. In a previous life, I had gone to bartending school, so I was really into mixology. And so I started experimenting with flavors and what this herb does and what this root does and all these other things. Like, oh my gosh, kale is really bitter, but if you add lemon to it, it counteracts it and it's better. Ginger is amazing. I didn't know how amazing ginger was until I started juicing. But then people at my job, I worked at East End Neighborhood House at the time, were always seeing me come in with these mason jars of this green and red stuff and lemonades. And they're like, what is that? And they wanted to taste something. So then I started making them for my CEO. Then I started bringing them to class. When I was in your class, Victoria, people would see me with the bottles and see the stickers on stuff. Then I did a couple pop-ups. And this is actually I keep it over here. This is actually a menu from the very first pop-up that I did in Collinwood with 12 literary arts. This is a menu.
Oh, that's cool.
So I started doing a pop-up that I financed via IOB because the pop-ups were intended to do juice demos in neighborhoods. I did one in Buckeye, I did one in Collinwood, and I think I did the last one in Buckeye. And so again, the juice business was to meet a need. I wanted juices and I made them myself because I got pissed off that when I didn't have produce or me and my roommate didn't go grocery shopping, and it's like, okay, well, I'll go buy juices today. I had to go to Beechwood, or I had to go to Ohio City, or I had to go to Tremont to just grab a juice. I couldn't go in my neighborhood, not even Larchmere, not even Shaker Square. And there was a juice business at Shaker Square that just closed down recently, but it pissed me off. And so I saw that there was a need for healthy food options, healthy whole foods, and Black urban communities, because we know food deserts are real. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like I should have to leave my neighborhood to access something whole and healthy for my body. Mm-hmm. I need to create an opportunity for that to exist for not only me and other neighbors. So that's how Ujima was born. So I feel like venturing and thinking about how to create impact, for me, it has to address a community need, and it has to appeal to the sensibilities. You have to know your demographic. And for me, I knew my demographic, and I believed that I shouldn't have to pay $10 for a juice either. And understanding my demographic, I know that, you know, cousin Nene is not going to pay $10 for no juice when she could go get Kool-Aid from the corner store. I don't care if it has more sugar. It stretches for my entire family. So how do I make healthy food more accessible? And that's what appealed to the concept appealed to, yes, there's a need. But then my business brain clicked in. How do I make sure that my supply chain supports me justifying a lower price so that I can still be profitable in providing these options? So then it got into, well, how do I get better produce that's still organic and healthy? Then I discovered perfectly imperfect produce and the ugly fruit process. And you know, just really thinking about, oh, if I do source from urban farms, I shouldn't source from a farm that's in Southern Ohio, because now the transportation costs are not as beneficial for me sourcing at a farm that's on Central Kinsman with Ridall. And that's Black owned. Like, how do I establish the relationships? And so a lot of times people have tried to make my business. I started this, there's my LLC in front of me. March 18, 2016 is when I got certified with the state as an official business. And a lot of people have been like, well, why don't you have a building right now? Why aren't you selling more? Why aren't you doing this? Because I'm not so focused on the product. I understand what my product is. I know who my demographic is. I know where my building is going to be erected. I have floor plan designs for this space. I know everything because I have the foresight that we talked about earlier. But right now, what needs to happen for me to do what I need to do 2 years from now, which was 5 years from now then, is I have to have the proper supply chain to keep my costs low, so that I can still be profitable and my product is not overpriced and then inaccessible to my demographic. I have to do the stealth things behind the scene right now to make that happen. And fortunately for me, those stealth things include stuff like the podcast and in having conversations like this and being visible in other spaces as Bianca Michelle, because when it is time for that building, when it is time for me to invite you to that space, I'm not only inviting you to drink juice and break bread with me, I'm inviting you to support a business that is steeped in purpose, principle, environment, and rooted in community, so that you know that when you buy that juice, it's not just paying the salary of the 17-year-old that's working behind the register or the 65-year-old that's back there cutting juice, because that's my intention to hire intergenerationally, but that it's supporting a principled individual who stayed committed to neighborhood, community, and purpose. So I'm okay with being stealth right now and you not seeing me selling juices a lot, because I know that what I'm doing right now is sowing into fertile ground for manifestation and delayed gratification.
Thanks for that. That's real venture creation, right?
Yeah. And if someone wants to order juice in your neighborhood, how can they do that right now?
They can reach out to me via Instagram on Ujima Refresh. And I know you said you're going to share that in the notes. That's the best way right now because I'm only doing small batches. Summertime is here, so I always do a couple pop-ups in the summer, and I publicize those openly to people. But I do small batches of juice. Like when we get off this call, I have to go make a half gallon of turmeric lemonade for my friend Erica Brown of Neighborhood Connections because she wants some juice support for her health needs this week. And she's a juice drinker, like regular, Minute Maid, Tropicana juices, and she wants a supplement. Like this is at least better than drinking that. So Ujima Refresh, just send me a message and we'll work out the details and all the coordination, all those things.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we have 4 questions that we ask all the guests. The first one is, who inspires you?
Audrey Lauren. Audrey Lauren is a Black liberation feminist, queer poet, and she has this poem called Litany for Survival. She has a number of quotes that always resonate with me, like your silence will not protect you. Self-love is an act of political warfare. But there's this poem called Litany for Survival where she says, when we are hungry, we are scared we will never eat again. And when we are something, and when we speak, we are afraid that we will not be heard. But it is better to speak knowing we were never meant to survive. So even in knowing that you may not make it to another day, certainly make sure that you left it all on the table and put your voice out there because you weren't supposed to survive anyway. Mm-hmm. The system is rigged. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win, but even if you're not going to win, say it loud, say it with your chest so that people in the back can hear you. Even if you don't survive, you still said it. And it didn't fall on at least one deaf ear. Mm-hmm. So Audrey Lauren inspires me.
Thank you. What is your favorite sustainability or social impact book or resource?
Conscious Capitalism. I love that book. I refer to it often. And also, what's the other one? And I'm mad because I let somebody borrow it. Oh no, I can't. It's Thinking in Systems.
Yeah.
I love Thinking in Systems. It's right there. It's right there. I don't know what I did to it, but it got severely water damaged and I ordered another one. And it just came like 3 weeks ago. So Thinking in Systems, I really like one because there's visual depictions of these systems. But when you really do start to think in systems and take the time to digest that book, because the first time I read it, I was like, what are we talking about? Like, it was just, I don't know, I didn't get it. But once it clicked and I started to see things in systems, like be in places and be like, oh, this is where the disruption can happen. There's a cog right here in this wheel. Like, I really like that book a lot. And I feel like it's so applicable to a lot of things.
Bianca, do you want to know a secret?
What?
When I first read it and taught it, I didn't get it either.
I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, what is happening?
I knew it. I had enough inkling that it was important, but it's so complex.
You sounded like you knew what you were talking about.
Of course I did.
Yeah.
When I don't know what I'm talking about, I just ask questions.
I think it's called Blue Ocean Strategy. Is that what it's called?
That's by Nadia. Yes. Was it Blue? Oh. I'm looking on the bookshelf. I
also really like The Responsible Company. Is that the one about Patagonia? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. But Conscious Capitalism is one that hit for me hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still I call it the sustainability Bible.
Yeah.
Nothing really topped that. It's so comprehensive.
That's the one.
Thanks for sharing those. What energizes you in your work?
Um, Connecting people who haven't traditionally been connected but have very similar perspectives. So again, a hyper example in the work that I do directly, and more of the relationships that I want to build bridges for are between like the resident in Woodland Hills and the resident in Larchmere, who both care immensely about what happens to this overall community, both want to better understand um, the other's perspective, and both feel like they've been not heard or pushed about or not feeling welcome to the other. When I can see those two people have a conversation or experience commonality on a subject, it really gets my goat. It really gets my goat, because it's like, okay, what I've done the last 3 months and planning these spaces for people to gather and asking these questions and making sure people are, invited to these spaces and feel like their voice is welcome. All that work meant something because person A and person B were able to focus on their commonalities and not their disparate experiences, and realize that we do all want the same things. Now let's do some work. When that happens, I'm really excited. Mm-hmm. And when I see an institutional partner or a funder or somebody at the those types of tables have a moment when they realize they fucked up and they've gotten it wrong.
I love it.
Yes.
I love that. I live for those.
It's hard to be groupthink, right? When you're part of an organization, and this is, yeah. I've been in those meetings too.
And it's like, I told you 4 months ago, but you didn't hear me because my voice wasn't the loudest in the room. But you learn it
now.
Yeah.
The last question is, what do you do to restore yourself?
Oh, great one. I listen to a lot of music. I love music. I go on 20 to 30-minute walks with my dog. She's waiting for one now. I sit on my porch at really odd hours, like 3 o'clock in the morning or, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and don't say anything. I just sit there and see what's going on. I go walk in Donebrook. I have impromptu barbecues or bonfires with 2 to 3 friends. I burn incense and sage. I have dance parties with my dog, like put on some real high tempo Ari Lennox or Beyonce or some Stevie Wonder, and we dance together, and it's a lot of fun. I just try to intentionally find slices of joy, but the biggest one is my breathing. The breath has been restorative, especially over the last 2 weeks. We're like a week and a half ago, if you would have invited me to this conversation. And I think it's part of the reason why we haven't been able to coordinate calendars. But like a week and a half ago, I wouldn't have been smiling. I wouldn't have had the capacity to be on camera and to show up as my best self. But that breath is restorative because it allows you to breathe and still breathe through the pain and the frustration and the grief and the anger and the confusion and the guilt and the shame that you feel for not being involved enough. It allows you to breathe through those moments so you can get to the realization that where you operate is your protest. Where you spend your dollar is your protest. If you maintain your peace, you can better serve the people that you want to have the greatest impact to. Without the breath, I would have just stayed steeped in those other emotions that had me stagnant and feeling like I wasn't enough and that everything was insurmountable. But the breath, the pause, the moment of peace and stopping is imperative for me to be able to sit here and process all the things that we've talked about in this space together, to be able to listen to other people in my neighborhood tell me about their issues, and I don't get so bogged down with their suffering that I can continue to focus on the solution. The breath helps me do those things. So that would be my answer.
Can you repeat the quote that you mentioned earlier? The self-care is...
Oh, Audrey Lauren. I'll send you a graphic of it too. There's a beautiful graphic, but self-care is an act of political warfare. It's like caring for myself. She also used to say that the personal is political. Like what happens to me is political for me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be something that's on the ballot, but because it's personal to me, it's certainly an opportunity for me to be political. But self-love is an act of political warfare. I love Audrey Lauren. She also says your silence will not protect you.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have more conversations about that offline.
Well, we're gonna talk. We're gonna be
Yes.
friends. I mean, I was already your student, and look at all the years that have passed, and we still are connected. Like, look at that. You're not talking to all these other students like this. I know I'm special.
That is true. That is. Well, is there anything else you would like to add as we are closing on our conversation?
The only thing I would add is, in the midst of all we're navigating, seek to listen more, give yourself some grace. And I'm just going to say what I always say when I end my podcast or my 3 moments of gratitude. Be kind to yourself, be patient with others, go out there and be great. And if you choose, go with God. But the most part is the first part. Be kind to yourself and be patient with others. And I say that to everybody, but I'm mostly talking to myself as a reminder to give myself some grace. And once I do that, I certainly need to grant that same grace to other people, because everybody is not always operating from your same level of intelligence, your experience, your perspective. They have their own shit that they're carrying. And so be patient with them. And oftentimes, if we exercise a little bit of patience, we get to the root of what's going on. So that's all I would say.
Thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom.
You both are super awesome, dope humans. So I would gladly accept this invitation any day. So I'm glad I made it here.
This was great. Yeah, talking about community development and resident-led action always excites me and gets me going. So this was a great conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.